You guys aren't even in my district anymore.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to our joint planning commission city council meeting this evening. Got a full house. Thank you all for being here. We're going to jump right in and look for approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was November 30th. So look for a motion on those.
Motion to approve the November 30th, 2022 minutes.
Motion by Sherry,
I'll second.
second by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're going to jump right in. Item 2.1, discussion regarding a proposed amendment to the Wasatch South Hills MDA. Blake, you going to drive this one? And you can turn off your mics, by the way. These green if you want to turn them off during the presentation.
Can everyone see that all right? I don't know. I'll put you all to sleep, so sorry about that in advance. Okay. So hopefully you guys were able to read your packet. The packet included, with the staff report, the draft amendment that was written to amend the MDA. And then it also had the current land use management plan, the lump is what we'll call it, and the proposed lump. So just for reference, project locations down here in the southwest corner of the city. Everything that we're going to be pretty much talking about tonight is uphill of Mountain View Corridor. And the draft amendment, it's the fifth amendment, so there's been 4 other amendments prior to this. The main point of the amendment is to add some property that's currently owned by Staker, revise the land use plan, modify or clarify the total units that are allowed in the development and what's being used. And then there's an update on the notice information for the contact, which is just standard. They've changed management with the organization. And then there's a last page that's technical guidelines, and we'll talk a little bit about those in a little bit. But first item is, this is the proposed land use plan that you can see on the screen. And the developer's requesting to amend their MDA, and this is the main part of what's being amended. There's also, a few cleanup items. One of the issues we ran into as we've been administering this MDA is, when it was first written in 2009, there were some land use categories, and as they've moved along, some land use categories have changed names. So planning has had an issue with, there's multifamily townhome and in one, and it doesn't exist in the original or something like that. So we're trying to clean that up so it's easier to administer. And then this kind of lays out some of the things that will be required as we go through this amendment to make sure everything complies with what's being used in here, or proposed in there. Okay, so this is a comparison with the land use, the general plan. And remember, their general plan, they're vested underneath the 2008 general plan. So the one you're seeing here isn't the one that was most recently adopted. It's the one they were vested with. And this just kind of shows the uses. You can see this purple is mixed use, and it went away with this proposed plan. It actually went away with an adopted plan a while ago. So the mixed use went away, the commercial component went away, but the housing units stayed. Just for reference, so the low is kind of what is the low? It's kind of this yellow stuff in here. The low on the general plan is about 3 units the acre. The Wasatch South Hills low goes to up to 2.5 units per acre. So they have a few discrepancies between what the general plan says and what their land use is based on the number of allowable units. But planning's working through that analysis, and as we work further into this, we'll be able to give some discrete numbers on all of that. But really the purpose of tonight is to get some feedback on how we want to proceed with processing this MDA amendment application. This is a map showing the increases to each one of those types of uses I was talking about from the general plan to what the land use plan is. It's kind of tough to follow, but this also includes all the stuff below Mountain View Corridor. That's why you're seeing an increase in mixed use, because this was mixed use over in here. So there's some increases and decreases, but this just is a quick breakdown of the comparison between the proposed plan and the general plan they're vested under. Key point on this one is there's a decrease in the high-density residential. Let's see, I forgot to pass these out, but pass these around because this next slide kind of goes with this. This is just if you guys wanted to make notes, it's a side-by-side comparison of the current adopted land use plan and the proposed plan. And so you can kind of, this makes it easier to compare one pod to the next. Some of the key things, and they're pointed out in the MDA amendment, plus a few things that I added in. So pod 5 changes from medium to high density, but they're allowed, their units that they're saying that they're going to use in the table is pretty close. It's a little bit of an increase, but they're not proposing to use nearly all the units that are available to use in that pod. Pods 13 and 15 go from medium to low. 18 is a new addition. 19 goes from low to high. 20 is also a new addition. And then there is a removal of some park property, but there's an increase in open space in general. So as you make notes and look at that as we keep going on here, when we get to the end, we can have some discussion about that. This is the overall project, this is the DAI project, but this little piece of property, as we'll talk about the DAI project in a little bit, is potentially going to leave the Wasatch South Hills. I think it's pod 6. So we'll talk about that one more on the next presentation. And then this one kind of shows the DAI and Wasatch South Hills, the Wasatch project with the proposed roads that are part of the DAI project as well. Because there will be a PID that's being requested that will come back to the council, and the PID will fund a bunch of these roads. Some of the environmental impacts, you can see the hillside overlay. It kind of cuts down through the property through here. The Wasatch project is vested prior to the hillside overlay adoption, so it doesn't apply. But just keeping in mind that there is a lot of slope up here, so there is the West Harriman plan that calls out for some preservation of views and slopes and grades and things.
And the current East Harriman plan just encourages, it says we should be kind of working with the topography as much as possible.
Yep.
But it wasn't, a shall.
Okay. And then there's some existing drainage paths that cut down through, and I know engineering's been working close with their engineering group to try to keep those drainage paths in natural paths or accommodate for them properly so that we don't have any houses on top of drainage paths and things like that. Don't want to be in the news. Other impacts, there's some things to consider as we move into discussion here in a few minutes. We have key trail connections that we need to plan for and to give us access to all the open space that Harriman has been acquiring and purchasing over the last several years. Some special considerations, should there be special considerations for military operations in the area. And this area does have the one access from Wasatch out to Mountain View Corridor that's a right-in, right-out. Eventually, this road will continue down to Porter Rockwell, and so that'll give them another access, and then this one's dependent on DAI and DAI to develop up in this northern part. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of access, but if it develops on its own, it's got some limited access. And then this last slide here is just some of the discussion points I kind of wanted to give a prompt as we kind of move forward. What we're really looking for is some guidance. I'm sure the developer, they're here. If you have questions specific, hopefully we can refer to them if we don't know the answers as staff. The key points we want here is how to process this moving forward. Does the council want us to go to the work group format, or do you want to do it in a regular council meeting with all the council there? It's going to have to go back through Planning Commission as well, so we're going to have to do all the steps. But I think the first step is figuring out how the council wants us to proceed with the processing of this application.
Are you asking if we want to do a work meeting or if we want to do the little committee meetings?
Yeah.
In addition to that? I personally would prefer just to come to a work meeting. How do you guys feel? It's okay if you disagree. I do not care.
No,
I just don't want to get too fragmented.
What's the process right now where it needs to go next?
So the
To-
application
to
came
council
in.
Or to planning?
So I think the next item will be, if we come in, we're going to need to talk about, the finances of the project, how, the PID's going to be a big discussion with council because impact fees are PIDs and how it finances out. And then the land use discussion is going to be key with the Planning Commission and the council. So I think we just need to nail down the next step with the council.
I think if this was something that was starting from scratch, I think we would have to go through all those.
Yeah.
It would be impossible to do it any other way. This has never been through any of that process or any of those iterations of that process. And it just seems counterproductive at this point just to try and shove this thing that we've all seen a bunch of times into some new process where it gets, to your point, fragmented. The discussion gets fragmented. So.
Well, and the hard thing is there's not, I mean, it's all up for negotiation when you open up an MDA, that's for sure. But the likelihood of it going through a full-blown negotiation is probably poor. So there's so much of it that we can't do anything about. Like there are elements of this MDA that I think are very unbeneficial for the city. But it is what it is. And so I don't anticipate that we would roll back those things. And so if these are the things we're looking at, I don't know. But if it's a process that we've agreed to and we think we should go through the process, we can go through it.
I think one of our early concerns is, and one of these maps showed it, is just the general compliance with the East Harriman General Plan. And there are areas where they are proposing some changes. Now, overall, the plan is still complying with the density standards that we had agreed to in the existing MDA. But where those units are getting spent is shifting. And so we're requesting that the development partner not only does the MDA amendment, but we'd like to clean up our general plan documentation that would be consistent with their proposal. And then also a zoning amendment, because by agreeing to the MDA, we're signaling as a city where we want to rezone property. And we've had times where the MDA is saying one thing, but our zoning is saying something different. So we'd like to bring all of those in concert with this proposal.
So then I will ask you, do you think it'd be more beneficial? Because what I don't want to do is have a whole bunch of meetings and then we all have to talk about it anyway. So, you know what I mean? So it's like, was it more productive for us just to all talk about it? Or do you think that it has enough changes in it that we should probably form some committees and kind of look through the details in it?
There are some changes that I think that would be worth getting direction from on the council.
I think the whole group meeting is most better, because
Yeah.
I think having the committee meetings and not starting from scratch, we have a lot of it figured out. So I think it's going to be best to just put the council all together, book an hour, and let's go through and get us all up to speed, and we can talk about all the items. Because it's just going to be little pieces here and there. It's not like we're going to discuss a whole philosophy or something. I think it's just little pieces we're going to try to fix or correct or make better.
Well, and that's my same point, is that we all have to make the decision together. So sometimes it's easier to deliberate together rather than have conversations separate, and then we have to try and update people, and things get missed when you're not in a meeting. Sometimes.
Could we get through this in one work meeting, or would it be a dedicated meeting? I know how the last two went, so,
Is that a loaded question?
yeah,
You already know the answer.
yeah, I
I
do,
think the
but
challenge is that as we go, as, be careful how I say this. There are entitlements that were made as part of this agreement back in 2009 that are really antithetical to the plans that we have now, right? They're in some ways pretty substantial opposition to what our current general plan ideas would be for that area. So many times we have realized that those just entitlements aren't something we're very happy about. This is probably the fourth or fifth time I've seen it in 3 years, and I just am, every time it just gets worse, frankly. I mean, elements of it improve, but overall it just gets farther and farther away from what all of our residents tell us they want, what I know as a council what we've been working towards, what we would like, and I'm saying that just because I think that I think there's a lot of things that we'd like to see changed in this, and I don't see this as a simple discussion about just a few proposed changes that we need to get into. I think it's a time to open the door for a much bigger discussion, and I think that needs to be given some special attention. I don't think that's a one work meeting.
so a
45
special
minutes.
schedule work meeting.
So as a non-council member, I would just highlight there, I mean, this is changing a lot of benefits for the developer, especially if you look at where the pod 20 and 21 were, and now pod 22, which has been flattened out to the gravel pit operations. To me, this is like highlighting that the gravel pit kind of operations can change the whole look and feel of what you approved years and years ago. So I would just say, since that won't be the planning commission involved in those discussions, that you highlight that, as well as the recommendations of why we recommended no to Laguna, and I can't remember the other project, but now that's included in here. And so those densities and ignoring those general plans and changes that we've done should make sure we look at. I'm more of a firm believer that you should just let the old agreement die and create a new, if you want to develop a brand new one that addresses the current operations. But since I won't have a voice if you go to a committee, that's why I wanted to say it now, and highlight those focuses there. Because just looking at it, it does look like you get a lot more open space, but probably not what you would have gotten if you included the density that is in our current general plan. So I would love to see that analysis at least brought to your guys' committee when you look at it.
Yeah, and we're not in the open space yet, and this is probably a question for another day too, but I know it says on here 20%, but do they have to take the deduction when it's the slope and all that? You know, if it's a steeper slope, you don't get credit for
Their
the same
MDA,
percentage.
I don't believe accounted for the reduction on slope areas.
So
I
it
guess
just can
what-
be the whole hillside at this topography, and it counts as their 20% open space, right?
I guess what I'm trying to say is I would try and compare what's currently adopted to if it didn't get added to this, what your real density would have been, and then look at what's the benefit to the city.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to say, is have staff do that. Now, again, I wouldn't be in that committee, but I would hope that the council.
Adam, you're articulating very well the concern that I have expressed every single time this has come to us for a review. It consistently modifies things to the financial benefit of the developer, and not necessarily that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just speaking it to the standpoint of the developer sees substantial benefit, and that benefit is not in harmony with what our general plan is. And I'm just, I don't, I guess I'll just say on record, I'm really opposed to that continuing.
And that's why I'm just
So-
saying, making sure we actually compare
So,
what
I mean,
the
we'll do,
current
we'll do what we're
standards would
legally
have been.
required to do inside of the agreement, but,
So that's why I think it's important that,
Still
and
not
rather
okay.
than send it to little committees and we work on little things, we need to get together and decide if we want to move forward with this new philosophy here, or if we want to just say no, because I don't want to waste their time and our time going to committees and saying, oh, this looks good, and then come together and go, well, really, we don't agree on any of this.
Right.
So,
Okay. So I'm hearing just a work meeting then.
Work meeting.
Special work meeting.
maybe a-
And we'll
maybe a
get,
special-
we'll get a good general plan breakdown to show exactly the areas, what the general plan was for that area, how many units should be allowed. Because any area that gets added per the agreement, they get 4.5 units per acre in their bucket, but then that area has to develop per the land use designated in the general plan. And you can transfer densities, but you have to have, if you exceed in one zone, you have to come
Yeah,
from the same zone.
I'll go on record right now, I won't, I'll vote no for any agreement that continues their ability to add land at that density. I won't vote in support of any agreement to the MDA that continues to allow that. So if any of this proposal includes their preservation of that ability, I'm a no. Easy.
Okay. So that would be removing the clause that allows that,
Yep.
yeah, that was a crazy,
or this section.
crazy
Okay.
clause.
All right. And then these other items, they were kind of the prompts I put together. We've kind of heard it, is the residential type and amount, what the council and planning commission are kind of foreseeing. I think that's going to rely heavily on this general plan analysis in comparison to say what's there and what was always anticipated in that general plan. There's no commercial component in this right now except for what's already being developed, which is turning out pretty well so far. It's looking really good what's been done so far.
That's true, but, and that's great, and I so appreciate that commercial development, but if you look at that frontage on Mountain View Corridor, the only major road we have going through our city to eliminate every other possible commercial or even mixed use, to me, that's a detriment to the city.
Agreed.
That affects us big time to try and afford to pay for this residential without any commercial tax base going with it. I just think that's very harmful to us.
Our next item will highlight this a little bit more because the key roads, this one and this one are more full accesses off of Mountain View in the future. This one's just a right-in, right-out off the frontage road, so it'll never actually get full access. And then you have Porter Rockwell that accesses in the future. So they really don't have a lot of accessible frontage for commercial, but there could be services and things, so
Yeah.
there's other commercial stuff.
Those people need a gas station. I mean, I'm just saying that there's services that if you put that kind of density in there, they need access to services, so.
Okay. And then the roadways and mobility, we kind of talked a little bit about the vehicle access on the Mountain View and key roads. But then you're up in the side hill, up in the foothills here, there's a lot of trail access. So I think as this gets reviewed, considering how we access our trail networks and where things need to go and negotiating that in the MDA so that it's considered and thought about for bicycles, multimodal transportation, trails and paths, parks and recreation is all key to that. And then the utilities, we've been working a lot, and so Wasatch has been instrumental in the new water tanks that are getting installed right now, and DEI and Rosecrest. So that's kind of working its way through, and the engineers have kind of put that together. Jonathan and Justin have really worked hard to get the water and storm drain stuff put together so far. So I don't know if there's a lot to talk about there, but if there are concerns, we can bring them up. And I don't know, are there any other items or delve deeper into these items that this group wants to make sure is addressed as we move forward with this, besides the add the land clause and the commercial development?
I will just tag on to Steve and just say, I would ask Todd that anytime we open up an NDA for negotiation or for changes, I think it opens it up. And I would just ask that you look through this and say, here's the 10 things that really hurt our city kind of thing, so we can talk about those and have discussions about those and see if we can.
Open space, right, and the slope.
Yeah, the slope thing, that's a huge thing, you know, our,
Open space that can never be.
Or park strips, or
yeah.
all the other stuff that was
For all
done
the
in the past.
standards,
you know.
right? You can change
Yeah.
everything on our side, right? We can change it completely.
Exactly.
So I would just ask that you take a look at those, because the many times we've reviewed this, there's, seems like a lot of those types of things that are not beneficial, like, oh, if you say open space, it's like, okay, but you can't even use it. I mean, I guess you can if you're rock climbing or something.
Yeah. And I know
the
that,
things that are counted as open space aren't really, a hillside isn't a recreational
Right.
opportunity for the land use intensity that they're proposing down here.
Exactly, and it's okay, I mean, that's why we adjusted it, so that if it was on, you know, 30% or above slope, then you only get so much credit, you know, those kinds of things that should apply.
I would just second what Sherry said about the commercial components. I mean, you can drive down I-15 and there's commercial all along, you know, I-15. It's not on an exit, but it's still supports the people that live, like in Murray. I think of Murray, where you have different
Yeah,
commercial, even industrial type buildings, flex
Yeah.
space.
because you still have visibility from there, even if you took that exit and came down, you know, there's still, I don't think you have to have a major in and out. I go to our Maverick and it's a right in, right out.
And the hard thing is you have lifespans of certain products when it comes to like commercial, industrial. Residential is the longest, right?
Yeah,
If you build something residential, it's gonna be
Be
there for
forever.
100+ years,
yep,
so it's hard to change.
agreed.
any other items on the Wasatch?
I'm sure they'll come up in the work meeting.
Okay, that's some pretty good guidance there. I think that'll give us some stuff to move into a work meeting. Like I said, this one has an active application submitted, so it's running through the process and clock's ticking. We're working through it and getting it done, so we'll have that. I know we have one city council meeting in June and one in July, so somewhere in there we'll all work to find maybe a special meeting or some time in one of those to go over this, so, okay. We'll move on to the, is that all right?
Yep. Next item, please.
This was,
So the next one is similar but different. The Rosecrest DAI development does not have an application in yet, but we wanted to get it in front of you. It was going through a process to be an amendment to the Rosecrest MDA a couple of years ago, and then it stopped progressing and kind of went away, and now here it is back. So just like the last one, it's down in the southwest corner. It's actually surrounded, and you saw the one map. DAI is surrounded by Rosecrest and Wasatch. This is their general layout, so it's a little bit more refined than the Wasatch one. They're showing some lots. The darker orange is the property that will be managed and developed by DAI, and the lighter kind of yellow tan color is the Rosecrest property. So that's your separation between the two entities. So they do desire to enter into an MDA, and it causes a whole bunch of other work with Rosecrest and Wasatch, and they do desire to create a PID to help pay for the infrastructure here. So this one is going to be a considerable amount of work between Planning Commission and the City Council and the developer. We won't let them off the hook. They got to do a lot of work too. So the general plan comparison, one of the key things to point out are the commercial pieces. These are general planned as commercial. This isn't vested. You might remember that. This is all the new general plan. And so what we're seeing is that this froze and didn't let my commercial pieces go where they're supposed to go. So we'll go away from that. But the commercial is right here. This is proposed residential. That area is zoned MU2, but it falls underneath the guidance of the Rosecrest MDA currently. So there's some discrepancy there on how that's going to be administered if the MU2 holds or the Rosecrest land use plan holds. The Rosecrest plan has some open space and a detention basin and a trail through that area. So it does shrink, this proposes to shrink the commercial area down a little bit and put residential in it. And then these two little pods here are the commercial, and that would only be a little area here. So there's some pretty significant proposed changes here to reduce some of the commercial, which we heard on the last one isn't super desirable to the council, but if this was to progress like this, it would require a general plan amendment.
So it's where that red is on the upper left?
Oh, up here?
Yeah, isn't that where they've been grading that out right there?
Yep, that's
Yeah,
the big grading area.
That's a prime piece of commercial property.
Well,
That's
I
one of
mean,
our-
If you're cutting the commercial in half, you should cut the density in half. I think that's a
Yeah,
fair trade.
You got that, we had some good discussions at ICSC on those pieces of property.
This one's a full access intersection to future Mountain View. We only have a couple of those, so.
I mean, I would like to know from the developer's side, like, why they keep doing this? Because there's got to be a reason behind it.
Well, commercial land is slower to turn, slower to sell, and houses are fast to build and
That's
fast.
true. I guess it's
So-
turn times might be the
I think that's
the main
part of
pusher.
it, but you're right, I'll yield to, if you want to hear answers from someone else. Sure.
And the developers here, if you want to ask them,
Yeah,
if you're okay with it.
What's the square footage of the proposed commercial? Do we know?
Just because I know commercial's slower, I mean, to build out, get tenants, but the land's worth more per acre.
Or it's-
Is it that we need to allow them to do more flexibility with the commercial? I'm just curious.
Yeah, pass it on.
Here's a familiar face.
Chase, you're not a developer.
I know, I almost resent that title, but
I don't
I
like
guess I
standing
probably
close.
deserve it a little bit.
taller than me.
Yeah. No, it's good to be with you tonight, and Brody, appreciate the question. One thing I did want to add that Blake didn't mention is that area is currently in the Rosecrest MDA, entitled with certain units. The plan for that, and I should back up before I even dive into that answer, because I'm not here just representing DEI. We have a number of landowners here on the outside that are all owners within this particular plan as it's being presented. And so any of them here can stand up and say, Chase, you're way off. We got to talk a little bit in more detail about that. But one thing I wanted to, can I put this here for us? Thanks. One thing I wanted to add was that the current plan that you're seeing on this side doesn't add any more units than are currently entitled in the Rosecrest MDA. It's simply rearranging them and changing how they're laid out within that MU2 area to say, this will be the residential area and this will be the commercial area. If you recall, that's similar to what Wasatch did on Pod 35 when they took the residential, Pods 35 and 39, when they had the residential, I believe, on the outsides of those pods and just condensed it all into that corner where they're building those apartments on Pod 35. So that's a similar plan.
Yeah, and we got more commercial, because they condensed it and gave us more commercial. We didn't lose commercial.
And I don't know the numbers, Sherry, on that exactly of what that breakdown would be. The density's not increasing, the unit number's not increasing. I think the plan is that by condensing that residential into the apartments on the northwest side of that commercial corner, it opens up that entire area to commercial. But that's a good question. I don't know what the distribution would be if it was developed as a mixed use as opposed to RM and commercial.
I'd say, Chase, that I appreciate from a logical standpoint the argument saying, well, this is what it is and this is what we're proposing and there's not a change. I would just suggest that as a council, we've articulated frequently, our logic is the starting place isn't a great place to be starting from. And
That's fair,
so I think that's something that we should be talking about.
Sure, and that's a very fair question and point to make. And one thing we've looked at is by saying, because that's already in the Rosecrest MDA, part of this proposal, and I'm sure Blake was getting to this, would be to say, amend the Rosecrest MDA and we as DAI and the representative landowners are trying to come in the front door with a new MDA, right? And start from scratch and say, where are we? That landowner, and I can't speak for them, but they've got current entitlements, right? And I would imagine they're not willing to give those up, just as any other landowner would be to negotiate something that was less beneficial to them. And Mike Bradshaw's here on behalf of that landowner and can speak to that a little bit, but I think that's a fair point to make, Steve, for sure.
Thanks. I don't know if you already, did you have a question for Chase already?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, because, yeah, those are our main intersections to Mountain View Corridor, right? And, I mean, commercial land is very valuable, and I'm just curious from a developer perspective, what's driving to shrink the commercial?
Sure. Well, let me address first of all, like looking at the general plan, and I know, I keep hearing the word, it keeps shrinking over here, but understand that in that general plan area where it's all shown as red, there was always residential plan that's in the MDA. So even though in the general plan it's showing red there, that always had residential in it. Same thing across the street, across the corridor in pods, what was 35, 39, and 40, that's all there. Even though they're shown as red, and so you guys look at those and just automatically assume that that's all 100% commercial, that's not really the case. According by the MDA, by the original plan, that had a component of residential in it. Those had units assigned to those areas. So I mean, and the only thing that we've done on this map here, like was Chase indicated, was really show, now we've put the residential there and we've put the commercial there on that block.
But I guess,
So,
yeah, back to my point though, if commercial land is more valuable per acre, so to speak, what's driving, you guys could have more commercial if you went with our general plan, but you're choosing not to, and I'm just curious what is driving that?
I think from our perspective, when you say the commercial is more valuable, it's not, we don't necessarily see it as that way. I mean, the value to us obviously is, obviously it's driven of where it can be developed maybe today or tomorrow. And so we look at those different factors. There's also a certain number of, residential units you can get to and a certain amount of commercial you can get to before, you're just not, it's just not commercially viable anymore. And I don't mean commercial, you know what I mean by commercially viable,
Yeah,
right?
like rooftops. Yeah.
Right. So, so we feel that the amount of commercial that, in a combination with what we did as Rosecrest across the way and what we're proposing to do in here is the amount of commercial that's supportive of the area, of what can be in the area. So that's generally our feeling, the why we master planned it that way. As far as the parcel to the south, the additional to the parcel to the south is that area to the south of this right here, where we're showing residential there, is from a commercial accessibility standpoint, the topography and stuff just doesn't allow it to be that commercial takes up big flat spaces, right? So we've taken all the flattest, best commercial ground with access to and put commercial there. And the other areas that are more difficult, have more topography to deal with, and trying to preserve some of that, we've used that for residential. So that's kind of our answers to those questions.
No, thank you, that makes sense.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
I don't know what you want to say.
Well, I was just gonna point out that we didn't put this map together with the red on it, but, where the condo apartments are, the yellow in front of it is actually red. Those are commercial pads.
Okay.
So it's not quite as bad.
That's what I get for guessing what you guys were doing.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
No, it is, because topography is a big deal.
Yeah.
What's the proposed square footage of commercial space, roughly?
I think we have more acres than we do commercial.
Yeah, acres.
It's large. I think that entire
pad is 50 acres.
So I was reading through the CDA plan for this area, because we'll get to it in a minute about CDA. The CDA contemplated, I think, 600,000 square feet of commercial in all of the CDA. I'll show you the boundary of that in a second. And then it also had a bunch of acreage associated in square footage with office space. And so, but the very last statement in the CDA analysis said there's got to be flexibility for market changes. But I don't know what that flexibility, it didn't really talk a lot about the interlocal with Salt Lake County that we have limits the amount of residential you can put in there. So any residential that goes in right now puts us at jeopardy of losing our CDA funds from the county, which Rosecrest is dependent on receiving those CDA funds for reimbursement for the infrastructure that was installed. So there needs to be a delicate balance there. If there's going to be units added in the CDA, the first step is to get a statement or a resolution from the council that says we're okay with it, and then that resolution can go through and the county will start working to amend their interlocal agreement, and then we'll amend that. Then the units can go in here without any risk of not getting those CDA funds. So,
I'm wondering if the, so looking at the general plan, you know, it's just listed as general retail, actually that color. And I wonder if there's a way to get both, to allow some of the units there and obviously accomplish the commercial / retail, you know, vision that the general plan is. Whether it's a mixed use kind of, you know, system where you have retail on the lower level and then apartments above or something. That way you still get your density, you still get, you know, your housing units, but you retain the ability to have commercial and retail and office type, you know, buildings, you know, within space.
it's good to bring that up because, yeah, this commercial, or this parcel right here, not all of it, but a good chunk of it is zoned MU2 right now for mixed use. And so those rules, just to remind everyone, is if it's vertical mixed use, it's 70% commercial, 30%, or 70% residential, 30% commercial. And then if you're vertical, you get to go up to 15 units the acre, and if you're horizontal mixed use, you're 10 units the acre max. So.
No, it's a great suggestion. Yeah, I know, I was able to go to ICSC, and I can tell you, all the feedback was commercial developers are begging for square footage in our area. It's not that, oh, we can't fill it, it'll fill.
Right.
But I also talked to a few other developers that were adding some mixed-use components on new development. Existing development, they stay strictly with strictly commercial, but they are adding a mixed-use component just to add some viability a little bit more to the project. So it's a great suggestion.
One thing to point out before I leave this slide and keep moving on, this area that's not hatched has been dedicated to the city for the roadway. Since then, with all the grading, the roadway is going to need to curve. So there's going to need to be some type of property swap there to allow for that to go that way. So,
I mean, just to finish where that off, that was originally the plan was a South Hills Boulevard. Obviously, when the Mountain View Corridor came in with frontage roads, we went away from having that as what was originally called South Hills Boulevard, and then that's what facilitated it becoming a rounded corridor into that intersection.
okay. All right. So this just kind of, we jumped into it pretty good, but this is showing the area. And then the connections we talked about. But this just kind of shows we're sandwiched between these two developments. This highlights the properties that will be removed from the Rosecrest MDA and put into the new DAI MDA as it's proposed right now. And then this is the one that we'd already shown on the last presentation, the one Wasatch parcel that's potentially going to be removed from the Wasatch MDA and be put into the DAI MDA, depending on an agreement between those two parties. This is the business center, so kind of a blow up of that area. The business center includes the community college, this property, some of RSL. This has been amended since then, so I think we've carved out the actual building. And then you have pots 35 and 39. You can see there's considerable amount of housing there, and then the part that's in pod 39, and some housing down here that's already included in the development. We went back and amended the interlocal with Salt Lake County a couple of years ago, so the units are kind of spent there right now. And I spoke with the county, when was it, about a week or two ago, about amending it, what would have to happen to make that go. And I know this development, this property down here is also interested. They're zoned MU2 as well, so they have some units associated with that. They're wanting to amend this interlocal to allow some units down there. That's all zoned MU2, which would, I think it's 32 acres. So that would require about 10 or 11 acres of commercial down there. They expressed concern that it wouldn't be able to develop that much commercial property because of Academy Village and Center Cal in close proximity to them. And the road connection is kind of limiting them as well without a road connection to the east.
Remind me again what the percentage full of Center Cal is leased up right now?
98? 98%?
Yeah, and they'll be
Just checking, thank you.
And their office will be 100% or 98% by the end of the year.
By the end of the year, they're expecting, it
Yeah.
full, is what they said.
It'll
just-
fill.
I'm just curious as to how successful commercial has been in this area.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
just curious, thank you.
Seems
People
like
are
there's
big-
a need
people
for
are
it, huh?
fighting over it. It's kind of like when people used to put their house on the market and
Yeah.
everyone's fighting. They're having the same problem with commercial.
Is that developer looking to do any other additional commercial development in the area?
I hope so.
Do they have an appetite for that? Do they think that might be viable as well?
If
With
they're
their-
not,
with their
there's
rates,
plenty
they
of the
should.
people that are.
Oh, so they think they could build more commercial and it would be viable too? Okay, I don't know, maybe they're crazy.
Well, with that viability, I mean, which is closer to the campus?
Arguments.
Do you think
waste of
college kids go to retail?
College kids, yeah, you'd think they would shop as well.
Going into the environmental impacts, this entire development is outside of the hillside overlay. This would be affected by it as well because it's not vested. So that's good for the development, good for them, good for us. The streams you can see as they come through, this stream follows their open space, except for where that building was shown down here. And then this stream kind of follows the road, which is okay to put in a pipe and run through the road and kind of follow that along and then drop it out into the natural drainage is where it goes. And then just some things to consider as we're working through an MDA, is there's some concern with any vegetation up there, scrub oak stands. Do we want to minimize grading and make sure that views are kept in certain areas? So things to always consider with environmental impacts. And then just the same impacts or considerations to have from the Wasatch discussion. There is a lot more opportunity for access here. We know that this connection through here is vital and is needed about several years ago. So we'd like to, push to get that installed sooner rather than later. There's a new bill that the legislature passed that requires developments to go through a review with the Veterans Affairs Committee if you're within so many feet of the camp. So this will need to follow that process as well. And then there's some access. This is a city street access. This is an access to future Laguna Point, which I think is coming through Planning Commission pretty soon. Lower development that wasn't part of the Laguna Malibu, but the lower piece that was rezoned a few years ago. And then really good access to Mountain View Corridor, as we've discussed. And then just the same discussion points here. Are there certain things? I think we've heard loud and clear commercials, a big concern that we want to have addressed in this. Anything else that this group wants to direct the developer or the staff to work towards as we work to get an application submitted and get this brought in through the process? And then this is another one, working groups or the council in general. It's going to go through Planning Commission. It's going to go through the whole process, and this one's starting from scratch.
I think more active transportation for like walking and biking paths along Mountain View. I think we kind of missed that boat a little bit in Harriman. When you look at what's outside of Harriman along Mountain View, I know they're looking at a lot of regional connections through the Mountain View extension and things like that, all the way to Utah County. And I think incorporating that would be really wise to try and bring in through the city.
Like the asphalt paths we're seeing on.
Some of that can lend it.
Yeah, they're actually, UDOT's actually separating them, so instead of, like the Harriman section where it's a big giant sidewalk right next to the highway, they're actually separating and making it so bikes are bikes, people, walking paths.
Yeah.
They're actually looking at, I know Blake and I were at a meeting, I think Wendy, different meeting related to something different a while ago related to UDOT. But there's a lot of that connection coming right up to Porter Rockwell, and I think we need to try and figure out a way to get some of that incorporation done with any of these projects.
And some of that could be, you know, as you guys are looking at the plans as they come in, do we want to have a modified street cross-section where you're up in the side hills? Do you want less maybe sidewalk on one side, trail on the other? Think about those things, because that'll lend itself to put the bikes on, the guys that want to ride, or people that want to ride bikes on the road, they can ride on the road, but you can also go on the trail, you can walk on the trail, make the trail wide enough to accommodate both.
Yeah, I just know through this new section there, Mountain View, they're actually talking about more like true, almost like highway-like transportation for bikes and active transportation. So there are other means of getting from Salt Lake County to Utah County.
So, as I mentioned earlier, is this on, John? Okay. We've worked with a lot of different landowners in this area and planned a lot of those details, and we've got engineered drawing and designs. We'll submit all of that as part of our plan. What we were hoping for from the development side was some direction again about the process to go through. I know this council has done these working group meetings in the past. It sounds like you'd like to steer away from that, at least with the last project. But it is obviously going to take some time to get that 2 years of work with these different landowners in front of you and get all those details. So we would obviously just love to hear what your proposal would be. It sounds like, again, maybe just a work meeting where we're able to bring all of that to you and present all of that to you, because we do have a lot of those details down to engineered road cross sections with trail connections and connectivity. So we appreciate that feedback, and we're here to represent that we have that level of detail. We're just wanting to know how you want us to cram it down your throat. So.
Chase, one more thing I would just like to add, you know, since I'm one of the guys that have kind of been here from the beginning of our original development agreement, and I know, and I can tell there's a lot of sentiment around the table that maybe there's a lot of people around the table that don't like our development agreement, and I can appreciate that. Here we are 25 years later from our original development agreement with our first phase of Rosecrest, but you know, we do the best we can with the information we have at the time. And I think the plan has evolved over time as well. I mean, I can appreciate, Steve, your comments related to commercial, and we've tried to be, you know, supportive of the commercial and adding more commercial. I mean, you know, bringing Salt Lake Community College here and Real Soccer here, we've been all a part of trying to add those things. Those were all areas that had more residential in them than the portion we're just tweaking with here. I think what we're trying to do from Rosecrest perspective is just kind of finalize those last remaining pieces. And so what we've tried to put together is not another bubble diagram with changes for you. We've tried to literally lay out everything, the roads, the streets, the connectivity, the parks, the connection, so that you have the final vision of how Rosecrest finishes out, how Rosecrest is complete. And so you have a lot more detail in what we've put together in this, because we felt you deserve that now. How is this gonna finish out, and how is everything gonna work together and connect? So that's what we would hope, like Jake says, is to be able to go through a process where you can see that and then get that feedback. A lot of it is driven by this area in Rosecrest is the most topography challenged area of all of Rosecrest. We've tried to be sensitive to that. We've tried to be sensitive to the trail corridors and those things to get up into the foothills where we have another chunk of large open space that's still yet to be dedicated, you know, that we've already built trails through. And your future connectivity there. So we've tried to be sensitive to a lot of those things. But I mean, obviously, we're open to other suggestions and some of those things as we go through the process. But we just wanted you to understand what we've gone through to get where we are today. Obviously, it's been a lot of years, but we've tried to give you way more information than we ever have. We're going away from the pods and giving you what the actual thing looks like. So we're hoping that's helpful to you and giving you more things to talk about. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would just articulate, so I tend to use sarcasm often to articulate a frustration.
Sure.
So I want to be more, I want to at least endeavor to be more articulate rather than sarcastic. I think you, first of all, the fact that you are being more detailed in your planning is laudable. It's very much appreciated. Laying out all that stuff, it definitely helps us visualize what it is that you're asking for. Too often in the past, it's a circle with a picture, and they're like, we have no idea what that means. So that is much appreciated. I appreciate that some of the elements of the changes in the layout that you guys are proposing are reflective of past comments that we've expressed about the kind of property types and mix that we want. So there's been some changes, and as I've talked with the DAI representatives of some of their ideas, they've incorporated that. So that's all very much appreciated, and I'm not, I don't want to overlook or understate those things. But one of the things you articulated early on was this idea that you've come a long way from where you were 23, 25 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it is, and things do change. As a city, we've changed. The needs of the city have changed. The dynamics and demographics of the city have changed. My point of frustration has been that regardless of what changes have been made in the MDA, there has never been a change to that core density, the number of units entitled in the MDA. Every single change that's happened is saying, we'll do this, we'll just keep those units and move them somewhere else. We'll do this, we'll just keep those units in somewhere else. You bring in new land, and it just gives you more units that you're putting in the pot to use somewhere else. And that is the part to which I am just vehemently opposed, because that's assuming that land densities granted 25 years ago are reflective of the needs of the community today. I understand as a developer, you have those rights, you don't want to give them up. But as a city councilman working in the city today, I'm facing a different reality than you did when you got those entitlements. And so that the realities of the residents today is in conflict with the entitlements. And I'm called to represent everybody in the city, including landowners like yourself.
Correct.
And so I'm trying to resolve those issues that are in conflict.
I think, Steve, as it relates to that issue of, because you mentioned that you were adamantly, against the continuing of the additional property question. I think Rosecrest is to a point with our MDA that, again, we're ready to close it out. We're ready to finish this thing up. And so I think what we're saying is part of this process, we would plan on as part of our amendment to be removing that we won't be adding additional property. With what we're proposing here, we're trying to tie it up and finish it out. That's the foundation's mandate, that's our mandate, that's what DEA is trying to do with the properties they hold. So I think we're ready, Steve, to give that piece of it up. And somebody may look at that as being a big thing. I mean, has been important to us over time because we knew we would fill in with some of these pieces. And I think what we found is we filled in with the strategic pieces that we need to make things connect. And that's why we've worked with so many of the landowners to put this together, because it has been kind of herding cats a little bit. And that's why we started and stopped and started and stopped. But I think we're to the point we're ready to wrap this up. And so I think we need some tweaks in the MDA to do that, some tweaks in the land use to do that, and then we're ready to say, okay, city, I mean, we've loved you, we've had a long going relationship, but maybe you're ready to kick us out. We're okay with that, we get it. But we want to finish it up right. That's all we want to do. Does that make sense?
Appreciate it, thank you.
Hey, Blake, is there like a bunch of like community trail connectivity through this development? You know, like the
There's a
other
trail
roads
that comes
cross-
from Juniper Canyon along here and is always been anticipated to go underneath the road here and connect up and get up into the hills this way.
I think more what I'm asking is if you look at the other Rosecrest pieces, primarily the older Rosecrest stuff, there's tons of trails.
The
that
community
go-
trails
The
running through.
community trails. I think that that's another really important component in what has been done, and people like that in Harriman. They like to be able to go on their walks off the street and in the community trails and stuff like that. And when there's topography issues and stuff like that, that's actually beneficial, because, there's some fun stuff that, I don't know, do you like the trails? They don't have any in my area, but I know that over in the other Rosecrest area, I know a lot of people utilize the trails.
We've had discussions with them about their open spaces and trails and those kinds of things. So we'll make sure that's part of and that's something that Mike has always been passionate about, so.
Yeah, that I would I would say kudos to Rosecrest on those types of things, because those community trails meandering through the different residential developments are really a big add to quality of life.
Okay.
As a newcomer, and I'm trying to understand kind of what's existing, what's changing. So the DIA is a new MDA. Okay, so if parts of Rosecrest are transferring over to the DIA, do the lot assignments or unit assignments from Rosecrest fall into the new MDA? Or is it a clean break where, we can say, these lots that are transferring from Rosecrest to DIA, we don't want residential within those lots or those pods. We want them to follow the general plan and be more commercial retail.
It's a great question. So from what our initial analysis has shown is that it's following the general plan for the residential areas. And so if it comes out of Rosecrest, my anticipation would be that Rosecrest would lose the 4 units per acre, which is allowed in their MDA per that acreage.
Right.
And then DAI would have to negotiate whatever they're getting in their property.
Okay, so it's a clean
it
break.
would-
They
it would
can't,
be a
they
clean
can't
break.
transpose, the rights of
Yeah.
Rosecrest into the new MDA for those general
And
areas.
from what we've seen here, where Rosecrest had the 4 units per acre, this is, I think this is 3.4, 3.5. It's quite a bit less than what was over there, so.
Just,
You can see there's a lot of single-family proposed up in here that they're pretty large lots.
Yeah.
It gets a lot of slope and topography up there, so it's really how to either handle it with large lots or big open space that you can't do anything with.
Blake, I'd be amiss if I sat here and not said anything all night long. So it's more of a comment than a question. But where council typically deals with the financial, the political side of the city's development, the planning commission tends to deal with the technical side and what are we developing in order to enhance the livability of Harriman based on master planning and based on all this. One of the things that I look for when documents come in front of the commission is Harriman has limited land space, we have limited commercial, so I'm pretty protective of commercial when things come in to alter that. They better have a really good, clear reason, sellable reason why they want to change commercial. The next thing I look for is the density. From talking to the population, the public out there, Harriman's already getting a bad rap for so much low density. Whether it's justified or not, that's the perception. We have too much low density in the city.
High density.
High density, excuse me, high density.
I was like,
Other way around, yeah.
I've not heard that argument, Daryl.
Too much The other issue we have is the whole south side of Harriman is hilly. And too many times I've seen, again, on the technical side, road sections, subdivision grading that creates massive cuts, big fills, large, tall rock walls. So again, grading, I always look to keep it minimal. Big developments like this tend to do tons of surface streets, not just the major roads, but lots of grading involved with that. So I'm going to keep a wary eye on the grading of this project when plans come in front of me. I'm going to be looking at our commercial to protect that, and also the high density to limit that. So not really a statement. And Chase, you were in a lot of these conversations. You know exactly where we're coming from. Though those are the things that when this goes to develop and ink is put to paper and drawings are made and submitted, I'm gonna be pretty critical of them.
Great. Going to the grading discussion, this 12 acres right here is a proposed Jordan School District school. They own the property already, and that is shaped like this. It needs to become flat for the school. So it will experience some considerable grading around that area. And so that's one area where they're anticipating some significant grading that I know.
But not a lot of retaining associated with, from what you were saying. They can
Yeah.
grade it, take the hill out.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of
It's,
retaining.
it's
It'll-
like a bunch of
it'll-
boulders the size
yeah.
of this table have just been dropped all over up there. It's very interesting to go look at, but, so that's one area where I know they're anticipating some grading in that location. But, yeah, that was one of the bullet points, is grading's a very good environmental consideration, and I think the East Harriman Plan discusses a bunch of, minimizing your grading.
Thank you.
use, so, thanks.
I think why most of us are passionate about protecting commercial is because we went through a very long process through our general plan to find out that most of our money does not stay in the city. And I can speak for myself. I go and spend most of my money outside of the city because those services are not found in our city.
I think you would find that our budget reflects that.
Exactly. So, and we have a high medium income for our city.
Yeah.
In Salt Lake County.
And we're not taking advantage of that because we're
And
not offering those services.
it's leaving our city. So I know that's where our passion comes from. It's just like, there's no Costco inside of Harriman. There's, no big commercial. So if I want those services, I have to go outside.
That's right.
And there's a demand, there's a need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge need.
What, in the orange sections, what's your average lot sizes for those? I mean, obviously that, not including townhomes or, do you have any idea?
Yeah, we've got all those details. I don't have them off the top of my head. That would be something we would, thanks. That would be something we would present as part of our application submission and have that talking point with the council and planning commission.
My concern is simply, apart from what's already been said or obvious concerns, where are the kids gonna play? I've lived in some of those higher density areas, 10th of an acre lots, and the kids play in the street. And while that's kind of the yesteryear, oh, that's a cool place to play, it's definitely not the best place for kids to be playing. And given the fact that the grading's already a challenge here, the green space that is there is not exactly play area either. I just have a feeling a lot of kids would be congregating in streets.
Councilmember Henderson has articulated that point quite well over the years.
Yeah.
Pressure
That's his
cooker.
passion.
I do know there is some plan for some improvement in this area. So, but, yeah, the pocket park idea is not very beneficial. Okay, that's a good one. Any other items? That's a good, I don't know if we
That
got.
hasn't
we
been answered
circled
yet.
around on that yet.
I mean, we can always break out into committee meetings if we deem it necessary, but it seems like we should come together in a work meeting and hammer out a lot of it together, and then if we feel like it necessitates some committee meetings, we can do it at that point. Do you guys think that'd be okay?
I agree with you, Sherry. I think almost every applicant, the first time we see it, we should be dissecting it together and then splitting out if need be.
Yeah. that-
Especially if, this has been, not this particular project hasn't been 2 years in the process, but if the detail's there at that first meeting, then we can decide.
Yeah.
I think that's what I said today. I think the committee should be working under the assignment of the whole council. Like,
Correct.
we need you to go fix this particular area or flesh this part
And we-
out and then bring it back to us for further discussion.
And we may not need all 5 or 6 committees. We might need 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It's a philosophy versus details. I think we've got to get on the same page philosophy-wise before we dig into the details, which could be the committees. But
Yeah.
I think philosophy, we've got to get on the same
So
page.
for not, it just wastes everyone's time, the developer, the staff, our time. It's-
Yep, I
We have to
agree.
be, no, we're on the same page.
That'll help us shake out some of the needed information too, I think, because I feel like this one's gonna have a big financial component when we get into it, with the PID and some of the obligations the city has with Rosecrest, impact
Or even
fee and
CDA,
CDA
yeah.
reimbursement. There's a lot of moving parts with the CDA included as well, so, yep.
You guys have that pretty detailed on your side of the separations and stuff?
Yeah. Just for information, the PID letter of intent has come to the Community Development Committee already, has passed through that, so it will be coming to the council. It's just hard to figure out exactly what details need to be in that until this gets a little more matured, so it'll be moving along in July and August. We'll be hitting that pretty hard. So.
I think our general impression so far is, given the opportunity for the Rosecrest MDA to expand potentially into this property versus creating a new MDA that represents concerns of today at a lower density that it looks like overall than what Rosecrest has right now, it feels like this is a better direction to create a new development agreement that reflects our concerns today.
It just seems like there's some commercial discussion that needs to be hammered out.
Frankly, this isn't the first time I've seen this. I've talked to the developers on a couple of occasions about some of their elements that they're putting into this, and I do think this is an enhancement in many ways over what was proposed. I would agree with you, Mike. I think I've been very appreciative of the fact that many of the elements that have changed are a direct reflection of their listening to council concerns over the last several years and incorporating those concerns into some of their design elements. I just think that it's that there's probably some other elements that we just need to iron out and have some negotiations around.
One other thing to point out, you talked about the clause that allows them to add property. So it allows both Rosecrest and Wasatch to allow property and bring in, Rosecrest is 4 units per acre, Wasatch is 4.5 units per acre, for any property that was east of the disconnect line from Bluffdale. That line is this line. So the only properties that can come into either of these developments under the current agreement is Malibu and a couple of Staker parcels. All the rest of this down below is U.S. government, Camp Williams property. So there's very little property left. So there's probably not a lot of loss to take that clause out of those agreements. So.
I mean, one thing I would say to council, like when you look at this property, like some things that come to my mind, with a certain amount of units, is there a place, like a central gathering place for the people? If there's like 100 units, 200 units, like, is there a small park or some place where people can have a sense of community?
So base it on density or base it on the number of units in that area?
Correct.
Placemaking.
Yeah, placemaking. It's a good place to live. There's an age in place where there's different densities within a development. So if you like where you live, you can potentially stay there and move up in housing or move down.
In the staff report, the packet for Wasatch, if you look through that one, the last page had their parks and open space plan in it. It showed what size of park and where they were going to go. I thought that was a pretty good plan. It kind of gave a good idea where things would lay out. I don't know if it was enough or too much or anything, but it was a good way to visualize it, and maybe this plan would benefit from that as well.
Blake, we have all that information when we get to the work meeting. Like, we have a lot.
Okay. I remember seeing a plan a while ago when we were going through it before.
We talked a lot about that kind of stuff, so.
Cool. All right. Any other input?
I think we beat that one.
That's great. I appreciate all the conversation. This is helpful for us, and I'm pretty sure it is for the developer as well. So thank you so much.
Daryl, I especially wanted, all the comments were great. Daryl, I just love that you brought up the fact that
Thanks, you
that
guys.
you as a commission can look at this.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mike.
You bet.
That you can look at this a different way than we can. I mean, we do have a different lens, and I just appreciated your recognizing that. I think it's critical. So. Okay, that being said, future meetings, next planning commission meeting next Wednesday, next city council meeting in 2 weeks. The rodeo is also this weekend. Friday and Saturday. So come out to that. Farmers Market starts Monday night for the season, so that's Monday. It's gonna be a good summer. So, with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.
I didn't know if I needed it.